Hey there, Michael with the Reason RX podcast. Hope you are doing well. All right, today we're going to talk about logic, but it's going to be couched in doing an essay on the poem The Tyger by Alexander Pope. Wait, who is it? Not Alexander Pope. Wait, The Tyger. What's his name again? Down here. Move this stuff. William Blake, that's it. William Blake. The Tyger by William Blake. But this applies to everybody and everything. It's not just, oh, it's about literature, so who cares? This will illustrate some things about how to teach, how to think, how to learn, how reasoning works, how science works. It applies across the board. Logic is the art and science of correct thinking, of non-contradictory identification of things. It's how our rational consciousness works properly. It's the principles and rules we need to follow to be true conceptually to reality. Have good, legit, valid concepts properly formed, good, legit, valid definitions properly formed, good, legit, valid generalizations that are properly formed, concepts, definitions, generalizations that are useful. It helps us think efficiently. Logic does. So while we're doing that about the Tyger, remember it applies to everything. And I'm doing the Tyger because I actually did this in real life, real time, years ago, decades ago with a student. I wish I had this tutoring session on video because it was just awesome. Knocked it out of the park. I tutored this guy, different things, math. One time he wanted to work on this essay, so we did. As I talked about before, he ended up getting a 93 on the essay. I think he said that's the highest he's gotten on any English essay, maybe that year or all time or something. I'm not sure. I don't remember. And we only worked like once to like really analyze and dig into what he needed to do in the assignment. And then we got some ideas and then he wrote it on his own. So, I didn't look at it after that, but didn't see what he wrote, what he turned in, but he did really well and he was super proud. So, some things we'll be looking at are some definition, some concept formation, getting concretes, classifying, digging into a little bit of similarity and difference, contrast. Thinking is asking and answering questions. So some general epistemology, thinking skills. As I say, it applies. The basic ideas apply wherever we have anything, where we think conceptually. Physics, chemistry, math, history, literature, medicine, marketing, philosophy, fitness. We need to define certain things and have concrete examples and know what we're talking about and form concepts. Think conceptually about something and form sentences, identify things, form definitions of generalizations. So it comes up in all things. When we're learning about projectiles in physics, we need examples and a concept and generalizations, or whatever it may be. Heat in physics, we need examples of what heat is. We need to form a concept. We need to learn about it. We need to start integrating more and more abstract things, making more and more connections to see what heat is. You can get heat at one level, but then bringing in the atomic theory, which is a whole theory and a bunch of thinking and reasoning on its own, connecting heat to it, and seeing how they develop together is a whole different thing. Projectile, we get the concept of projectile. We need to form some generalizations. All projectiles go in semi-parabolic paths. All projectiles are under the influence of gravity, things like that. Or if we learn like synecdoche in language, using the whole to stand for a part or part for the whole. Like, we'll go over examples later. Learning what an adjective is, adverb, or, in real life, defining cancer. What the hell is cancer? What exactly is the cancer? What's the essence of it? That takes a lot of knowledge. There's something that's kind of going on. We can learn it, but what is cancer? And there can be different levels of understanding, different levels of knowing what it is. Biologically, chemically, biochemically, and all that. Physics. Then we need to form generalizations about cancer. It's very important. If we don't know what cancer is, we can't deal with it properly. We'll be misled, deluded. We'll be engaging in a bunch of wasted time, failed efforts. Like if we think a geode is an orange, we're going to break our teeth. We got to know what's what. We should define terms in marketing. You define terms, form generalizations. So when someone has goofy ideas in marketing, they waste a lot of money. But, this stuff's important. We need to be rooted in reality so we don't waste money. More importantly, so we don't injure people or destroy lives. Some stuff is not a joke or an academic issue. It's serious. Logic is not an academic issue. It's not airy-fairy. It's not in books only. Logic is about identifying what is real. That is freaking serious. And as educators, it's unethical to not help people be logical. Students need the training so they can use their cognitive tools, the conceptual tools, to be true to reality. We deserve it. Our friends and family deserve it. Students deserve it. Just people in general. But then as teachers, that's what needs to be done. The society deserves human, individual, adult animals who can think well, support themselves, be in contact with reality, help themselves, help their friends, help their family, help the culture. Their and our lives and well-being depend on how true to reality we are, how logical we are. Consciousness is a means, it's a tool of survival for animals. Lets us move through the environment and be aware and adapt more quickly than genes can. And reason is an aspect of that. Logic helps us use our tool of survival correctly. Look at human history to see all the disaster that happens when human reason is used improperly, abused, laws of logic are not followed. People think anything goes. Not good. So we need this. Very important stuff. As I say, we'll be doing this to look at the poem The Tyger by William Blake. But this applies to all other things. And I'll, go over some basics of what we went through, so far as I remember, from years ago, maybe over a decade, in tutoring someone in The Tyger. But first of all, let's get straight what we're talking about. The Tyger. Okay, the poem. So first, what is it? Let's read it. Let y'all kind of get some context here before we get into some of this stuff. And I'll put some links in the show notes so you can click on the link and read along, unless you're driving or something. But it'll be there so you can follow along. Because doing some stuff just by words, lecture, podcast kind of stuff can be hard to follow, but you'll be able to see, kind of read for yourself. So, the Tyger. Now, context for that, it's part of this, a volume of poems called Songs of Innocence and of Experience by William Blake. And William Blake, by the way, let me see, Wikipedia, the great standard of truth, says William Blake, November 1757 to August 1827. Okay, and I think these poems, this one book, but it came out in two parts. I think he had Songs of Innocence, and then Songs of Experience, and then put them together into one collection. It was in two phases, and so I think the first few copies, it says, came out in 1789. 5 years later, which would be 1794, he came out with more, something like that. But if you're interested, if you really care, I don't care. People can look into it on their own. But it says here, Songs of Innocence, complete work, first printed 1789. And then, Songs of Experience, published 1794. Okay. Looking at this Wikipedia thing, found that in a different part of where I was looking at first. So, Songs of Innocence, it's supposed to be, it says on Wikipedia, quote, this collection mainly shows happy, innocent perception and pastoral harmony, unquote. Let's see. Songs of Experience experience to him seems like negativity, hate, death, injury, pain. But I think Songs of Innocence were supposed to be more like kids' poems. Songs of Experience were a little better, more adult stuff. I'll read some of them so you get the idea. But first of all, okay, so that's context. William Blake, time period he lived, these poems. Okay, so here's the Tyger. Again, you can read along on your own if you want. But this is what the student had to write an essay about. Okay, The Tyger by William Blake. Quote, Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dares deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Unquote. That is the poem. Now some others, so you get the idea. Let's see. Okay, here, clicked on the wrong thing. So here, like, in contrast, like Songs of Innocence. Okay, I mentioned the lamb in this one that we read. Okay, the lamb. So, let's see. It didn't actually come up. Let me see if I can read it here. Yeah, okay. So, the lamb. This might be a little hard to read. It's like in a copy from the 1700s. Yeah, this, I don't think I can read all these words. I better look this up somewhere else. So let me click on maybe this. Yeah, here, okay. Here I can think. Okay, here, The Lamb. The Lamb by William Blake. Little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Give thee life and bid thee feed by the stream o'er the mead. Give thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly bright. Give thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee, little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I a child, thou a lamb. We are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee. Unquote. So there's that one. And some others. Let's see if I can read this one. Okay, here's a short one. The Blossom. Mary, Mary sparrow, under leaf so green, a happy blossom, sees you swift as arrow. Seek your cradle narrow, near thy bosom. Pretty, pretty robin, under leaf so green, a happy blossom, hears you sobbing, sobbing. Pretty, pretty robin, near my bosom. Unquote. That's from, those two are from Songs of Innocence. The Laughing Song. I don't think I can read this one on the print that I see. But, let's see if I can find another one. Spring. Okay, here's Spring. This is the third one from Songs of Innocence. So, quote, sound the flute, now it's mute. Birds delight, day and night, nightingale, in the dale, lark and sky, merrily, merrily, merrily to welcome in the year. Little boy, full of joy, little girl, sweet and small, cock does crow, so do you. Merry voice, infant noise, merrily, merrily, to welcome in the year. Little lamb, here I am, come and lick my white neck. Let me pull your soft wool. Let me kiss your soft face. Merrily, merrily, we are welcome in the year. Unquote. Kind of annoying, but it's like, kid stuff. So it's like on purpose. And then there's the Tyger. In London, here's from Songs of Experience. So we had 3 from Songs of Innocence. Here's another one from Songs of Experience. Supposed to be like the adult stuff. Okay, quote. I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, ever blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlots curse, blast the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. Unquote. Nice. What a beautiful view of life. Suffering and ugliness and everything nice like that. A little boy lost. Quote, not loves another as itself, nor venerates another so, nor is it possible to thought a greater than itself to know. And Father, how can I love you, or any of my brothers more? I love you like the little bird that picks up crumbs around the door. The priest sat by and heard the child. In trembling zeal he seized his hair. He led him by his little coat, and all admired the priestly care. And standing on the altar high, lo, what a fiend is here, said he, one who sets reason up for judge of our most holy mystery. The weeping child could not be heard. The weeping parents wept in vain. They stripped him to his little shirt and bound him in an iron chain, and burned him in a holy place where many had been burned before. The weeping parents wept in vain. Are such things done on Albion's shore? Unquote. Nice. That's so beautiful. Kill people who and burn them at the stake when they reason. Okay. Not. So there's some from Songs of Experience. You get the idea. That's what's going on in these. So again, the Tyger. I'll read it in part later. But that's what we'll discuss. Now, it was interesting in doing this. The student had already started to write something. And good thing I didn't just go with that and try to develop it. I wanted to see what his assignment was, see what's going on, make sure we're helping him out. So, sure enough, through no fault of his own, he wasn't stupid. Smart kid, private school. Unfortunately, because of the way some teaching and stuff is done, and how we need more, shows how we need more logic in schools, he wasn't doing the assignment. He was writing about like the theme or the meaning of the poem. In other words, more generally, he was writing about a literary element. Literary elements, things like plot, theme, characterization. Not all that comes up here, obviously, but with literature in general, that can come up. But he was doing something like that. But the assignment was to write about literary devices used in the poem. So, because of the way things were presented and the way he'd been trained conceptually, because of the lack of logic in the schools, not knowing how to do some things, as I used to not. I sure the hell didn't figure this out on my own. I spent a long time kind of like doing some of the same stuff, only because I learned from other people. Do I know this? Thank goodness. But because of a lack of logic, the student didn't have clear in his head, in real terms, the difference between literary element and literary device. So everything he had done so far was wrong. His misunderstanding of the assignment was wrong. It's unfortunate. Now, let's see, click on here. Literary element. This isn't like Wikipedia about literary element. Let's see. A literary element or narrative element or element of literature is a constituent of all works of narrative fiction, a necessary feature of verbal storytelling that can be found in any written or spoken narrative. This distinguishes them from literary techniques or non-universal features of literature that accompany the construction of a particular work rather than forming the essential characteristics of all narrative. For example, plot, theme, character, and tone are literary elements, whereas figurative language, irony, or foreshadowing would be considered literary techniques, unquote. Now, he didn't know, like a lot of people, what literary devices were. Literary techniques, as they're saying in Wikipedia, the bastion of truth. But, so we had to go over some of that. And that was the fun part of this, part of the fun part. We had to go over what the theme was and some of this stuff. So he knew that, oh yeah, okay, that's a literary element. And these other things are literary devices. But what the hell is a literary device? To get some of this done, and done properly and rationally and logically, and to have it make sense, we need to concretize. I know that's important. It comes up in teaching some grammar. It's really interesting. People, like students working with them, yeah, okay, an adjective is a word that modifies a noun. An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, adjective, or adverb. But that's all airy-fairy and floating if there's no real content to it. When people have examples, when I have them write down adjective, define it, put down examples. Adverb, define it, put down examples. Then they can figure out which is which by looking at the examples. And then some people have some good lists of adjective and adverb questions. Thank them for thinking of that. And it's valuable stuff I like to use in teaching grammar. For adjective, 4 adjective questions, 4 adverb questions with adjective. What kind? Whose? How many? Which one? I write down those questions, have the students write them down, put down examples for each one. And then when I say, what part of speech is this? Okay, what the adverb questions first? Let's see, we'd have that. So we have adjective questions, the 4. Adverb questions, why, when, where, and how. How being in what manner, why being like the cause. Hence they're different. So one, like how can be a condition, or like slowly, that can be how something is done. Why is how, the reason it's done. So we have these 2 parts of speech, 8 questions, and then students can look at examples to see if a certain word is like these certain examples, and therefore know what part of speech it is. Otherwise, it's airy-fairy and floating. Concretes matter. Richard Feynman did that when he was doing physics. He learned to think in terms of concretes, to be real. We don't want to get lost in words, lost in math. We want to be real. We need concrete things to think about. It's true in all things. Physics, chemistry, math, history, literature, medicine, marketing, philosophy, fitness. Like if you want to understand running, what is running like? Is it most like walking? Is it most like crawling? Is it most like jumping? What do we learn from all that, from those comparisons, looking concretely? But looking at concretes matters. So we can't just say, oh, here's like, when I'm working with a student, I can't just say, oh, here's this kind of literary device and this kind of literary device, or literary device is a technique. So what are some techniques? You have no idea. You got to form the generalization properly, form the concept. We got to start with lower level stuff and work our way up. Just like no 2-year-old can know what government is because they don't know the concepts or context yet for that. It's way too abstract. Or heck, like some month-old kids don't even have the concept of family yet. Family or friend, never mind neighborhood, society, government, politics, anything like that. Just like 2, 3, counting, number. Then you can get the concept of arithmetic, algebra 2, calculus, and so on. You got to build up. But, so we need some concretes. It's essential in all things, as I say, no matter what you're teaching. Projectiles, heat, synecdoche, cancer, things in martial arts. So, and notice when I'm doing this, I'd use like Q&A as well to help drive his thinking. Show him some stuff. We got to be efficient with our time. You can't let someone learn everything all on their own. It'd take forever. Just as it took people a long time through history to figure some things out. So the idea that one person can figure all this stuff out on their own, all this stuff that took like many people millennia to figure out, is like ludicrous. We need focus. We need someone with the wisdom to provide the big picture and make connections that matter, that can't be learned by someone only starting to learn a certain subject. They're too swamped. So, to get into what a literary device is, after you show them a little bit that literary element are these certain things, and that's not what the thing is about, we want to see. So, we look some stuff up, crank up the laptop, pull up some websites, show the student some things. So let them see some literary devices, find a website that has a lot of them listed, then focus on certain ones. So, like here, literarydevices.net, alphabetical order, accumulation, ad hominem, allegory, ambiguity, anacoluthon or something, anagram, anapast, antagonist, and all this stuff. There's a bunch of them in A. B, ballot sentence, bathos, biography, and then this whole big long list, which of course we're not going to read. But lots of literary devices. So you need to pick out some things that he might use, and we need to concretize them so he knows what he's talking about. So we got to stop. We can't do the assignment until we figure out what the heck literary devices are, and he has a concept of some of them so he can use it. And some things, of course, to some extent he'd already known. He just didn't had things well done enough so it was automatic and he knew that they were literary devices, and he brought them to play in writing this essay. So here are a few. Assonance. Assonance is a literary, quote from literarydevices.net. Assonance is a literary device in which the repetition of similar vowel sounds take place in two or more words in proximity to each other within a line of poetry or prose. Assonance most often occurs in the repetition of internal vowel sounds in words that do not end the same. So here, from The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I think this is an example that literarydevices.net had. It said, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. Weak and weary. Vowel sounds. From Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. You got the A sound? So, and we got alliteration. That's a nice one. Alliteration is, to quote from literarydevices.net, quote, alliteration is a literary device that reflects repetition in two or more nearby words of initial consonant sounds. Alliteration does not refer to the repetition of consonant letters that begin words, but rather the repetition of consonant sound at the beginning of words. So it doesn't have to be the exact same letter they're saying. Like sometimes the letter C can be pronounced like a K. Like can, C-A-N, it's not san, it's can. And here from examples, yourdictionary.com, alliteration. Here it says, this one from Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. But for hours later, the fish was still swimming steadily out to sea, towing the skiff, and the old man was still braced solidly with a line across his back. Some messes there. Here's some. I'll read these because some of these are awesome. Some alliteration. So, Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So you got that K sound. Again, it's not letter, but the sound. K in color, K in content, K in character. Oh, that's a good one. Or, here's one. I got Robert Frost from Acquainted with the Night. Not that this is one of the great ones that I like, But alliteration. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat, and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet, when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street. So you got these S sounds. Stood, still, stopped, sound, alliteration. Abraham Lincoln, Gettysburg Address, sweet. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. And let's see. So you got the two S's, 77. Beowulf. Here. He was 4 times a father, this fighter prince. One by one they entered the world. Haregar, Hrothgar, the good Helga, and a daughter. I have heard who was Onella's queen, a balm in bed to the battle-scarred Swede. So you got some S sounds in there. And then just read one or two more because they're nice. Of course, I won't read all this, but from the movie V for Vendetta, major alliteration in that, if you remember. There's one scene where he says a bunch of V words. Voila, in view, a humble vaudevillian veteran, cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate. This visage, no mere veneer of vanity, is a vestige of the vox populi, now vacant, vanished. However, this valorous visitation of a bygone vexation stands vivified and has vowed to vanquish these venal and virulent vermin, then guarding vice and vouchsafing the violently vicious and voracious violation of volition. The only verdict is vengeance, a vendetta, held as a votive, not in vain, for the value and veracity of such shall one day vindicate the vigilant and the virtuous. Verily, this vichois of verbiage veers most verbose. So let me simply add that it is my very good honor to meet you, and you may call me V, unquote. And here, Martin Luther King Jr., awesome quote right here. This is from an article he wrote in 1947, The Purpose of Education, in the Morehouse College newspaper, the Maroon Tyger. He says, quote, education must also train one for quick, resolute, and effective thinking. To think incisively and to think for oneself is very difficult. We are prone to let our mental life become invaded by legions of half-truths, prejudices, and propaganda. At this point, I often wonder whether or not education is fulfilling its purpose. A great majority of the so-called educated people do not think logically and scientifically. Even the press, the classroom, the platform, and the pulpit, in many instances, do not give us objective and unbiased truths. To save man from the massive propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief aims of education. Education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction. Unquote. Awesome. Some alliteration there. The two F sounds, facts from the fiction. And you got the M sounds in there. Save man from the morass of propaganda. And you got this alliteration with the P sounds. Even the press, the classroom, the platform, and the pulpit. And so on. So alliteration. Of course, I didn't go over all these examples with the student, but I wanted to read those because some of those are so awesome. Alliteration. Easy to use in everyday life. As long, it's very effective as long as we don't overuse it. Then it becomes annoying. But, so we have alliteration, euphemism, literary-devices.net, quote, euphemism is a figure of speech commonly used to replace a word or phrase that is related to a concept which might make others feel uncomfortable. Euphemism refers to figurative language designed to replace phrasing that would otherwise be considered harsh, impolite, or unpleasant, unquote, as we all know. Um, like instead of saying someone is annoying, say um, their presence is less than desirable or something like that. It's saying something without kind of being real about it. Um, your appearance is less than pleasant, something like that. Um, okay, synecdoche. Um, here, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Not that I like it. I'm just reading it that way. Sorry. It says, quote, "It was the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down. Its if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again," unquote. Um, you know, ear standing for the person. So it's not literally clearly an ear that follows it up and down, but the person. Um, Shakespeare, Hamlet, quote, "'Tis given out that, sleeping in my orchard, a serpent stung me. So the whole ear of Denmark is by a forged process of my death, rankly abused. But know, thou noble youth, the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown," unquote. So, um, a serpent wears a crown, so it's a person, clearly not a serpent. Or maybe the serpent was like a sword. But I don't remember that part of Hamlet. And then foreshadowing, hinting that something's going to happen. Hyperbole, an exaggerated claim. Imagery is another literary device. Figurative language, of course, to evoke, experience, or create a picture with words for a reader. Clearly, that'd be something that would come up in this poem. Metaphor, we know metaphor and simile. Simile is a comparison using like or as. A metaphor, it's a comparison without using like or as. A simile from Bruce Lee. Love is like a friendship caught on fire. There's a simile. Or from Khalil Gibran, quote, "Life without love is like a tree without blossoms or fruit," unquote. Personification. That's one that he knew already, and most people know. You go, oh, that's a literary device. That's something I got to look for. Yeah, that's kind of like in the poem. But personification, a figure of speech in which an inanimate thing is given human attributes or feelings. Symbolism. So we went through and we looked at some of these to see what in the list of literary devices would be relevant to doing this assignment. Some we had to develop, we had to get concrete examples, define them, solidify it, and remember it with the word, the name of the literary device, hyperbole, synecdoche, imagery, whatever. Get some examples, define them, label it with a word so it's a concept. And then we got the examples so we can see, like this thing in the Tyger is like this thing here. So it's a literary device like synecdoche. Oh, it's imagery. But of course, some of these we learn through the years. They're not too difficult. And so he had examples, and some of these were already concepts, were meaningful. Metaphor, simile, imagery, personification. He and I didn't have to dig into those too much. But we had to look at a list and see what literary device actually meant. And then look some up, see what they are, give meaning to some. And then we could look at the essay, the poem, I mean. So again, we've got the Tyger. To read it again, now that we know we're looking for literary devices, we've gone over some that might be in your mind. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's some physics, projectile motion, something in marketing, something in fitness. We need to have concepts to analyze a situation and do something well. Or notice how we, like he and I, asked and answered questions, we reviewed, we got stuff in our minds, and then we can apply it to the assignment. So again, it's the same thing. No matter what one does, if one is a coach, one is a teacher, one is a trainer, review certain things before you hit the situation. Make sure the context is fired up in people's minds. It's not just a brain thing. People might think you do it for the brain, but it's for the mind, for thinking, for reasoning. Brain's relevant, yeah, clearly, but mind and brain are not identifiable. Now, the poem. So we'll think about literary elements. How are things being done and described? Imagery, personification, foreshadowing, anything like that. So, Tyger, Tyger. So, quote, Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fires of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp, dare its deadly tears clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile to see his work? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Unquote. So, we analyze it, we break it down. So we've got some concepts to apply here. And then I can ask and answer some questions with him to get him to focus on certain things and to see how he'd feel, how we do this. So, clearly in here, we got some things like a hand framed the symmetry, an eye framed the symmetry. Clearly it's not really a hand that does that or an eye that does that. So we got some synecdoche there. And on what wings dare he aspire? Then clearly we got some imagery here. So some synecdoche, some personification, stars threw down their spears, watered heaven with their tears. So once we've gone over this, these concepts, then bam, 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 the student can start picking some of this stuff out. Here is personification, and he knows it. He can write about it. He's doing something independently. It's cool. He's applying concepts. We're learning how to do it. Then we got the synecdoche thing, clearly imagery. So then he's got some things to write about. Got enough. He can dig through it. And then, so we got this, again, think about concept formation process in general for different areas. Math, history, physics, chemistry. One is developing a theory in physics or doing some word problem or some unit. What concepts do students need to do that? Or in chemistry? What concepts do students need? Or in fitness? To do some movement well, biomechanically properly, what movements and what movement concepts do the students need? How do we do it well so we're strengthening ourselves and being a good human animal and not strengthening dysfunction? Without good technique, if you don't do it well, all one is doing is strengthening in training and making habit dysfunctional movement patterns. Not good. Should not be done. But get the concepts, bring into play, and then we can use asking and answering of questions. So here, for example, I remember asking, where's this one part? If we got, yeah, like here, in what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? So we're talking about maybe this Tyger. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night. Okay, so someone might not grasp onto that or think about that, but then you just ask, okay, how would you feel if you're in a village and you see these eyes glowing in the dark at night outside the village in a forest? What if you're near? What if you're far? Clearly, then they can get that sense of visceral fear, and then they can write about it. And it's real. It's on their own. It's not airy-fairy words BSing. It's something they can be real about. Some real fear. I don't remember some of the other things we asked and answered questions about, but I remember that in particular. Yeah, we did the personification. I remember the spears and tears. Some synecdoche. I don't remember if we did that or not. Probably. Imagery. I know he was big on that right away. Using these different things in here for images to provoke certain feelings. The tiger, the lamb, the anvil, and all this stuff. The way the creation is presented of this tiger. It's like something being forged in a furnace. A lot of imagery there. And then you've got this implication, this hint at what is doing this. So when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile to see his work? Did he who made the lamb make thee? So then, in context, a student can deduce that it's a god who's doing this. Some god making a lamb, and some god, maybe the tiger stands for like the devil. That's a little, what's the word, libelous of tigers, because tigers are awesome. But that's William Blake. But so there are some thinking skills and some logic that come into play in this. We could not have done it without. Could not have done this assignment well without it. And then, as I say, some of those things people should be trained in, and it should be pointed out. This will help you in marketing. Are you going to want someone, when you hire someone in marketing, who just is not in touch with the reality and concretes and airy-fairy thinks things up and thinks something would be cool, and who goes off about like the equivalent of literary elements instead of literary techniques? No, you need to know, someone needs to know who is the audience. Define it, have examples, classify things. They need to know why a person would want a product. What is the product? What's important about it? How can the person use it? Ask and answer questions. Put it in context. These same skills can be used in marketing, and it should be pointed out because someone's not necessarily going to know. Who the hell automatically thinks that, this stuff we're doing can be applied to marketing? No one. Not many people. Okay, of course, it's an exaggeration saying no one, but you get the idea. I sure the hell didn't think about some stuff I was learning in school being applicable to like marketing or whatever, or something in English being applicable to physics. Like show me the person who's sitting down doing the vocabulary in English and who figures out how to do it correctly instead of just this word string thing. You have a word, you copy down some word string in a dictionary, and you use the word in a sentence really poorly, and that's vocabulary. No one figures out how to get concrete, how to put in context, how to use contrast and similarity to form a concept, and no one goes, oh, hey, I can use this in physics. Same thing there. This needs to be pointed out to students so they know the value of what they're doing and the broad applicability. We don't integrate or think in principle automatically on our own as our heart beats. Reason needs to be trained. Using reason correctly. It's volitional. Heck, because there's so much in us that's volitional, and because we're social animals, we're so influenced by others, a lot of people cannot even walk. A lot of people in America and in the West can't even walk or breathe correctly. I couldn't either until I got trained as a fitness instructor and learned from other people how, and saw how all these things I'd been doing were wrong. Otherwise, I mean, thank goodness I got certified. Otherwise, I would still be doing it wrong. But not because of any incompetence, just because of lack of knowledge and bad movement role models in the culture, lack of good ones. A lot of people, big proportion, do not walk right or breathe right. But that's for another day. And people can just look it up if they want. Look up MoveNat, natural movement. Look into experts who know how to look up Harvard Barefoot Lab. Look up people who know how to walk right, move right. Katie Bowman. As I say, people at MoveNat, natural movement. People who talk about barefoot running. Some running experts are really good, some are not. Look up how to breathe right, so-called belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, very beneficial. But a lot of stuff we are not going to know on our own. It needs to be pointed out, trained, developed. We need to have concrete examples. As I say, even think on your own maybe if like once we first read the poem, kind of what your thoughts were versus what they were after we went out, reviewed, and concretized some alliteration, personification, synecdoche, things like that. Then when you read over it, you can process it more, think about what's happening, enjoy it a little bit more. When you stop and think about the situation and question it, like how would you feel if you're in a village and there's not much around and you see some eyes in the darkness of the forest? What kind of fear would you feel? You can write about that. Brings out what's being said here. Or some of the word choices, like when it says, what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? It's like, why twist and why sinews? Like, it's twist, not shape. Or make. Make would be general. Twist is that force to it, like twisting a towel to wring out the water, as opposed to like make something, which is kind of vague. And the fact that it's in a furnace, when you think furnace and anvil, one thinks heat. That kind of imagery, that feeling comes up, and that word choice, and using those. An anvil, a hard metal thing. People can remember objects being beaten on an anvil in movies we've seen. They're holding something, some piece of metal that's red hot, some other piece of metal or whatever is being used to hold it, and then the horseshoe or whatever is on the anvil, and it's being beaten with a hammer. we got that imagery. And then if we actually think about, instead of just read as like empty words, the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears. So it's the stars doing both things, crying to one place and throwing spears down onto the earth, in contrast, crying on heaven and raining spears down on earth. So that is the basics of what we went through. To have him write this essay, I think we took like, I don't remember if it was like he and I, hour and a half or 2 hours. I don't think it was an hour. I think we did like an hour and a half or two thinking about this, talking about it, asking and answering questions, discussing it, and I pointing out to him how some of this can be used in other areas. Having him take some notes and write things down, get ready for his essay. But there. So clear logic used in writing this essay, and some good thinking skills. So again, for different things, the same stuff would help. Be concrete in thinking. Concretes are necessary to have a concept that's real. That's a basic aspect of logic. Knowledge is an awareness of reality. You can point to your head when you say awareness, point to something when you're saying reality. Knowledge is an awareness of reality. It's not just some awareness. There's no such thing as an awareness. You got to be aware of something. There's got to be that something, the concretes, that we're aware of. This is not just a matter of empty words, but it's a matter of having things that are similar in a context and in contrast to others. As I've talked about in other podcasts, like in the logic one, what a concept is and all that. But when we do this here, we can better write an essay. Then people are ready to learn marketing, do marketing better, or learn parts of speech better, or learn projectiles versus other things better, or learn what heat is, or learn about some elements in chemistry, or some concepts in history. Instead of airy-fairly throwing around certain words in history, what are specific examples of socialism, communism, absolute monarchy, capitalism, totalitarianism? Specific, concrete things that make these up instead of throwing around the words vaguely. How are the things similar and different? And then you can get those and form generalizations about them. So it's in everything. If we're going to think well about government, we have to know what kind of thing in the world we're talking about. Just like we need to know the difference between an orange and a geode. Or a snake and a stick. So we got these different things about logic, as we're saying. Concretes making up a concept. With the concretes, concretes concept and definition, but it's really with the concretes that we're able to successfully find other things alike of the kind. And the definition can help us do that. It comes up a lot in, as I say, learning about adjectives, adverbs, prepositions. And then when you need to bring in some more complex thinking for some things, because people need to see, like in some grammar, it's not just the word magically in isolation, no matter what, that is a certain part of speech, because some prepositions can be subordinating conjunctions. I ran before the stadium. kind of like, you're in front of it. I ran before the rain fell. So I ran before the stadium in the sense of like in front of it. Before the stadium, that's prepositional phrase. Before the rain fell is a clause. Before the rain fell is a subordinate clause. So before in that case is a subordinating conjunction. Or we ran after the criminal. After the criminal, prepositional phrase. We ran after the criminal pulled a gun on us. The criminal pulled a gun on us. The criminal did something, subject and verb, it's a clause. We ran after the criminal pulled a gun on us. After is a subordinating conjunction there. So it can be used as different things. We've got to look at the context and see what's going on. When we have some examples like that, students can better get it down. That's something, of course, you'll find you need concrete example and concrete example to get some things down. One cannot just say vaguely with some undeveloped, contentless definition. You can't claim something and students all of a sudden magically get it, because that's not the way consciousness or reasoning, the human mind, work. Again, all different areas. Concretes matter. That's one thing this shows. We need to have concretes to form concepts. In a context, the definition can help us only then. And then we can identify these things in English and write a better essay or whatever. Asking and answering questions helps the students focus on certain things, and then they can learn to do it more on their own. Sometimes you ask and answer questions, or I know I've done something with some student, teach them some stuff. Many students across the years, do they get it? No. Because like people in martial arts, no. Like people in music, no. You got to drill and repeat. I know when I was getting a teacher credential certificate, some people are so ludicrous, they would call some stuff drill and kill. That's what they like to call it. Drill and kill, drill and kill. Oh, we can't do that. That's like bad education. Okay, yeah, well, why is it so successful in martial arts? Why is it so successful in music? Piano, whatever. Drill, drill, drill. Or in chess, or in sports in general. If you're going to go to a concert, you don't want to go watch someone who's never practiced. They need to practice, practice, practice. They need to drill, drill, drill. I remember some people talking, some dancers talking about that. They were, I forgot, there's a famous choreographer, name doesn't come to me right now. But people who would work under him, they would still have stage fright. They were trained, polished professionals with years or decades of experience. Sometimes they would still have stage fright, but because they learned to practice over and over and over again until it became habit, they would drill, drill, drill. They could still go through a routine without a problem. Drill is important. You got to do something multiple times to do it well. That's what makes like great tennis players who can play at Wimbledon also. It's the same thing in learning. Students need to do some stuff over and over again to really get it down. And then it should be pointed out to them so that they make it a habit so they can do that on their own. When they have people working under them, they can have those people do it, because we all have to some extent, teach and train for different areas of life. Parents have to, in some respects, be teachers and trainers. Bosses have to, if they're going to be good, they have to some extent be teachers and trainers. We have to present information to other people. Just as humans, we're always teaching and training other people in some stuff. Not fully and systematically as someone in primary education, some teacher, but we all have to do that. So if we know how to do it well, we'll be better off. And if they would ask and answer questions, they'd be better off too. And that's actually something some people do. What is it called? The 5 Whys, WHYS, developed in Japan to help people think through problems better and try to find a root cause. It's not 5 every time, no matter what. Obviously, could be 3. You ask why 3 times and get to a root cause. Maybe you got to ask 13 times to get to a root cause. But, you know, you can't call it the ask why however many times you need to find the root cause process, because that's ludicrous. You got to come up with a name for it, hence the 5 Whys. But not necessarily 5, but just to get the root cause. Or maybe they call it the 7 Whys. I forget. I think it's the 5. But asking and answering questions is very important. It's actually done by some people. They teach other companies, they consult, they teach people how to ask and answer questions to think through things or get to a root cause, because the people in business don't know, because they're not learning it in college or high school. Should be done, could be done. It would help people write better essays, think better, be more efficacious in thought, be more independent. Remember, the whole purpose we have thought and consciousness and reason is to be better human animals, to live better. Be aware of the world, to know what the true and the good are, and to follow suit, to act accordingly, to strive to achieve that. Help ourselves, help our friends, help our family. So it's not an irrelevant thing. It's a big, fundamental, important task, and this will help. So I hope that helped. Hope you see the broad validity of this to other things, and you can try it out. Look at parts of speech, get specific examples, think on your own. Okay, for an adjective, it is a word that modifies a noun or pronoun. And adjectives answer what kind, which one, how many, whose. Get the questions and think about concrete things that answer those questions. Adverb, a noun or word. By word, of course, I don't mean a noise. I mean a concept or part of speech, but word is short and precise, so I like that. An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, adjective, or adverb. The adverb questions: why, when, where, how. Write down some things that answer those questions. Do that with someone else to study some grammar. Look up some literary devices, find examples, and try to use them in your own writing. Or in your profession, make sure you have examples of specific concepts. Or for teachers, of course, teachers should be all over this, seeing how to apply it in their own profession, in their own field of what they teach, so they can give actual examples to the students and be real, bring it to life instead of being lost in books. And then develop ideas from that for assignments and all that. But it applies everywhere. Physics, chemistry, medicine, marketing, philosophy, fitness. If we do this, then we can be real. So, hope that helps. Hope that wasn't too pathetic. Hope that was a little interesting. But just kind of a overview or summary of what I did with a student years ago, maybe a decade or something. 2 decades? I don't even remember when it was. Really good session about digging into logic to help him write better. Anyway, hope you enjoy, and you have a good week, good day, and all that, and I'll talk to y'all again soon.